Hi, it's Josh Rubin with the Rubin team. Let's take a look. All right, guys, it's Josh Rubin back with the Rubin Special. Today is Wednesday, December 7th. I'm joined by none other than my friend Eric Simon. He actually wrote the theme music, so Eric, I'd like to thank you for that. All credit.
Of course. Thank you for using videos and photos of me from 2017 when I was 30 pounds heavier. I appreciate that.
Well, you know, that's all that was online when I went to find your bar mitzvah photos. So you're looking good back then.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you.
So, Eric, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule with all that you're doing with our friend Byron and Broke Agent Media. You guys are knocking them dead there with the social media stuff. And, you know, I know that you were in production for a while and you did everything that a lot of us dream of doing. You got out of production. But I'm curious if you could take us back first. You know, how did you initially get into real estate? What was it that inspired you?
Nothing inspired me to get into real estate, to be honest. I had a marketing position at the Laugh Factory Comedy Club on Sunset Boulevard here in Los Angeles. And that was my first job out of college. I went to USC here. And then after realizing that there wasn't really much I could do at the Laugh Factory, like they weren't going to promote me or anything. I wasn't a stand-up comedian. I was literally just posting on their social media. I quit the Laugh Factory. And then for about 4 or 5 months was unemployed and was just making Vines. Remember Vine, the 6-second video app?
Yeah, that's when like people jump into the pool and out of the pool.
Yeah, exactly. It was like TikTok before TikTok, basically.
Right.
And then right after that, I got a call from a friend I had who worked at a brokerage, Hilton and Highland in Beverly Hills. She was the receptionist there and said they needed a temporary receptionist for 2 weeks. And I needed to make some money. So I figured, why not? My dad was in real estate, so you know I'll at least have something to do for a couple of weeks until I find the next thing. And then I answered calls and was kind of like a mini assistant for a lot of agents. Got hired kind of at a more full-time role where I was the receptionist for about 3 or 4 months, and then got hired as a marketing assistant for a top agent in Beverly Hills named David Kramer. So that's when I actually started viewing properties, writing property descriptions, helping out with the marketing, figuring out the brochures, setting up open house signs. And then I became a buyer's agent, and then I became a solo agent after that.
Huh. And so you kind of just worked your way up, but you kind of came to it from a marketing and social media angle.
Exactly, yes. And that's what I was hired to do with this agent, was write property descriptions, create stories around these properties, and exactly figure out like the website, the writing, and all the marketing and how to like implement that on social media. So it was kind of like a similar role that I was doing at the Laugh Factory, except in actual real estate, and then learning the terminology. I remember walking around these massive, 7,000, 8,000 square foot houses, these mansions in Beverly Hills, and, walking around with a notepad trying to come up with the actual description for these properties. And I didn't know the lingo to any of these. I just knew like 4, massive contemporary, so I basically had to like figure out all of the vernacular of real estate. And that took a very long time.
Yeah. For years, I've been describing myself that way to prospective sellers, massive and contemporary. And it's pretty well.
4. Yeah. I mean, those are the only 3 words I could come up with on the top of my head. So you can see how good I was at those descriptions.
So working at the Laugh Factory, what are some of your, like 2 or 3 most memorable moments while you were there?
I saw Jeff Garland from Curb Your Enthusiasm. That was really good. Chris D'Elia was always really funny with his crowd work. But the most memorable moment I had there, you never know what's going to happen at a comedy club. And I was in charge of their sick nights, meaning if there weren't too many tickets being sold that day, I had to come up with like some ridiculous promotion and post it to Facebook. So we came up with an entire night called the Kosher Comedy Night. As a Jew myself, I was like, let's get a bunch of Jewish comedians in here. Let's have it hosted by this guy, Rabbi Mentz, who's kind of like this celebrity Beverly Hills or Bel Air rabbi. And it's a Orthodox synagogue. And, we had all these comedians, Jeremy Hotz. Jeff Garland wasn't part of that, but all these Jewish comedians. It was supposed to be a clean comedy night. And Jeremy Hotz who's got a very dirty set, went on and just was talking about sex and all this stuff nonstop. And the crowd was just going silent and booing and going crazy. And the rabbi had to come up and stop it. And then Jeremy was just like, this is why people hate us. This is horrible. And it was one of the most like awkward events I've ever been a part of. But we got like 80 people to the show, which is pretty good.
Yeah. And what night of the week was that?
That was a Tuesday night.
I was going to say it was probably like a dead night. Like it's the in between, like the Tuesday, Wednesday, when they had nothing better to do than to take a flyer on Eric Simon's, kosher
comment. Exactly. Yes.
Right.
And we had to, ship in an entire temple to basically fill the seats. And, it went well from a promotional standpoint, but in terms of the awkwardness and everything that took place that night, glad it's over.
And I'll bet you probably had to give out like kasha and bow ties or, kosher pickles or something like that in order to get people even to consider stopping by.
Yeah, exactly. The good thing is LA is very, Jewish friendly. So they had all the accommodations right there. They had yarmulkes and everything for everybody. It was perfect.
Before you step in for services, please take a yarmulke.
Exactly.
And so you were working for Kramer for 7 years or so, right? No, actually you were.
So David Kramer I worked with for about 8 months, and then I became a buyer's agent for Alfonso and Bjorn Ferrugia. They're these big agents out in West Los Angeles. They also worked with Hilton and Highland. And that's when I was door knocking, cold calling, and basically just trying to get expireds. And that was my entire job, was sitting open houses every Tuesday, brokers opens every Saturday, every Sunday. And then Monday through Friday was call people for, from 8 to 12, and then door knock basically from, 1 to 4, and pray that I got rejected by everybody because I had no idea what I was doing and no idea what to say.
Yeah. And so what was, like a breakthrough moment when you were that rookie agent, buyer's agent, cold calling, door knocking, doing everything that, people need to do when they're first starting out? Was there one standout moment that you remember that you kind of broke through and you're like, oh, this is something that, I might be able to do?
I wish there was, Josh. There was no breakthrough moment, and that's why I actually stopped working for that team. There was one moment where I actually had someone pick up the call and went to her house, dropped off a flower, this lady seller. She was like in her 70s. And I actually set up an appointment for my bosses. That was my entire goal, is get them a listing appointment. So That was the only time. And then they were also Jewish. I'm not only referencing Jewish things right now, but they took off for the high holy days and then didn't contact me for a couple months. I kept following up with them, and it was basically a dead lead after that. But that was the only breakthrough moment I really had, where I actually made contact on the phone, made a good impression, in person, and actually set an appointment, even though that appointment never actually happened. I remember feeling very accomplished about that specific aspect. But I mean, back then I was just like, this is impossible. Like, these are the steps that I have to take to even acquire a listing. And then it actually has to get marketed and sold. And this is back in 2015, 2016, where it wasn't just such like a hot market like it was, for the last year and a half, not talking about now, but, COVID basically through the first half of 2022. Yeah. So I was just like, this is going to be absolutely impossible. So I stopped working for them, became a solo agent. And then the real breakthrough moment, I guess, from a real estate perspective, was that my friends actually finally started getting married, buying condos, and buying their first purchases.
Huh. So instead of being like that secret agent, everybody in your sphere knew exactly what you were doing. And, with that sort of previous foundation of trust, they reached out to you and said, hey, we're thinking about doing something. So you kind of worked that part of your business, and that kind of gave you your push.
Yes. I was not a secret agent. People knew I was a real estate agent, but even though I'm so heavy on social media now from a broke agent and broke agent media perspective, I did not post about it much at all on my own personal brand. I honestly felt a little embarrassed about being a real estate agent at first, because it wasn't like a cool thing to do. None of my friends were in real estate. They were all in like tech sales or finance or the entertainment industry. And it kind of always felt like a career to me, where it was a secondary option, where it's just like, okay, I did something else. It didn't work. Oh, I just fell into real estate. I'm going to try this. I'm going to leverage my network. So I always felt kind of a little embarrassed about it at first, to be honest.
Interesting. So you kind of waited until I'm not offended. I'm embarrassed by myself every day, Eric, so
Right,
it's
of
all good.
course.
And so you waited until you had a few deals under your belt and you got some momentum going. And you said, "Hey guys, hey, I just did this deal." You're not
Yeah.
like necessarily asking people, "Hey, who do you know who's buying or selling, or do you know anyone like you, who's thinking about doing something?" You're just kind of sharing more about your experience, and then people begin to kind of think of you when they're considering doing something.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of more word of mouth and then just, hey, I'm selling my friend's condo right here. And, that friend telling another friend basically. So again, there was not too much like outward marketing, which is
Right.
kind of hypocritical from everything that we promote on BAM, but it went against everything that was in my social instincts, basically, of reaching out to people, trying to get coffees with people, explain to people what I did. It always
Yeah.
felt very invasive to me.
Right.
And I wanted, like, I was always kind of like the fun, funny social person. And then it was like, okay, now I'm going to take care of your most, expensive financial transaction of your life. It
Yeah.
flips our relationship on a head and becomes a little bit awkward. But I was good at that aspect of it as well. Like every deal I did with my friends, I took so seriously to the point where it just gave me like unstoppable anxiety about it because I didn't want our friendship to suffer from the actual deal.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. And so, is there sort of a standout transaction, from those early years as you were going out on your own, whether it be with a friend or another deal that you remember? Like I
Yeah, I
remember,
mean,
I remember, my early days. I remember, certain moments.
yeah, I remember the first deal I did on my own because I always did it with a mentor for like my first 4 or 5 transactions. The first deal I did on my own was with one of my best friends, and getting to actually call him and say his offer was accepted, and all the recon I did before, going to all the open houses, just staying in such strict contact with that listing agent. I remember it was a Saturday. USC was playing Washington, and I was supposed to meet up with him later that day to go to the bar and actually watch the game. And I was like, this is going to
Yeah.
be absolute hell if he didn't get this place. And his parents were involved in the transaction, and they were contacting me, and it was just such like a relieving call to actually make that was
Sure.
like the first true moment in my real estate career where I was like, all right, I like this aspect of it. This is the aspect I like. But that's one very small specific moment in an entire transaction of mostly pain that was happening throughout it, right? Like all the other news I was delivering was bad news. It was like, oh, we got to
Right.
come up another 10 grand, we got to come up another 20 grand.
Right.
Like that was just one call, that and the closing call basically. So it was like two
Yeah.
of, 2000.
Yeah. It's interesting, Eric. I often tell people that, they look at me and they think of this, super successful agent. And I look at myself as this person who, slogs it out day in and day out and, doesn't get a lot of listings that I go for. And a lot of the offers that we make, for one reason or another, we, don't get them. But, the more that we do is the more successful we are. And it's the successes that we celebrate, of course, and it's those successes that people see. But it's kind of like Jordan or any other professional player, and those successes are built on a foundation of failure. But the public loses sight of what built the foundation for success.
Exactly.
And so, at what point did you then sort of start to bring social media into your business?
So never in my actual real estate business, but the broke agent was brought into just my life in 2015. So I started January 2015, which is almost 8 years ago now, which is crazy to think. And it was always kind of a side project that I knew would eventually become my full-time job, but there wasn't really a way that I could think to monetize it back in 2015. The entire landscape of social media was so different. Instagram didn't have Instagram stories. It didn't have links. My following was nowhere near where it is now. Like there wasn't Patreon, there wasn't really, I mean, there was podcasting, but there was such a barrier to entry to it where you can't just, flick on a camera and do it now and mass distribute it to everybody through Audible or YouTube or something like that. Maybe
Right.
there was podcasting, of course, and there was YouTube, but it wasn't like a click of a button type of thing. So
Right.
that was always going on in the background was the broke agent. It was really just build Instagram, build Facebook, build Twitter. And it works so perfectly with my actual real estate business because I was providing the inner monologue of what it was like to be a new struggling real estate agent. in a time where the kind of social media landscape was all about grind culture and success and motivation, and every real estate agent was just posting their wins. So it was the exact opposite of what every single person was doing in real estate on social media. So I think that's why it really took off relatively quickly. And just kind of consistently did that throughout the years, being like, this is going to be something someday, but I just need to keep nurturing this and building this and staying consistent with this while I still do real estate to actually pay the bills, make
Right.
money, and actually get content from real estate.
And what inspired you or gave you the idea? I mean, you started in January 15, but then and it found traction because you were sort of topical, and there were a lot of people getting into the business at that point. But what sort of gave you this idea that rather than posting as Eric Simon, I'm going to come up with this moniker and this whole idea of the inner monologue of a struggling agent?
So I started with a friend at the time named Wes Pinkston, and originally he wanted me to help with a marketing project he was working on. He was building websites for agents, and he said, on top of this website, these individual property sites, agent sites for agents, I want to have like a blog portion of it. And I said, great, I'll do a funny blog, because I've always written in a comedic way. I've always done funny sports writing. I had a blog called The Pudgy Caddy right out of college, where I was basically writing about the social life of a young single Los Angeles guy, but combining sports and doing like sports poems and stuff like that. So that was always like my passion, and I was always applying to writing jobs throughout my entire real estate career, because I was like, this is what I'm going to do, write for The Onion or something, write for Clickhole or Barstool Sports or something like that.
Right.
And then I was like, all right, let's make this a funny blog. And then let's call it The Broke Agent, because it's the exact opposite of everything else we're hearing. And that day we went back straight to my couch and just got the handle on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and YouTube, and just started kind of tweeting out little, funny thoughts that I was having, just about like, oh, no one came into my open house today. It was all very like depressing content.
Right.
Like if you look back to the post back then, it's all like stuff I wouldn't even post today that like almost makes me feel bad about.
It's like cringeworthy.
It is like my dad, it's like just constantly complaining and stuff. But for some reason that hit, because you didn't see that. And you're like, why is this person like exposing the real estate industry like this? So that was kind of where the inspiration came from, was the idea of just, let's do a blog first, because blogging back then it wasn't like, let's start an Instagram account back then. It was like, let's start a website, let's start a blog. Like, let's make this blog huge.
Yeah.
So the blog was really the focus, but then I quickly realized that I was getting way more traction off of a tweet or a clear to close meme or an appraisal joke or something like that than spending, 3 hours on a blog post and getting no shares, basically. So that's where the focus started, was just social media, basically pumping those out.
Cool. For some reason, I was just reminded of the Instagram handle. I think it's Milo the Cat. Have you seen this?
No.
So it's like cartoons that you would know, like Scooby-Doo or He-Man, and it's a scene from the cartoon, and they're, it's a typical scene, but instead they dub over like classic hip hop tracks for some reason. And that has its own following. So I'm just thinking of all these different unique social media handles that aren't the typical, like, hey, here's Josh sells New York again, and with another win, or here's Josh with his kids. It's more along the lines of this like totally different account, like an avatar in some way, and you become very well known for your avatar. But then it's almost like, in a way, it's almost like a superhero, where you are talking about the inner voice of struggling agents. And anyone who's been in this business for any amount of time knows what it is to be that struggling agent. I know when I first started in the business, I came into it through a company called City Habitats nearly 30 years ago, where you just show up in the office and the manager starts routing leads to your desk as long as you're there, and you're there on a consistent basis. And you start to take people out, and you get the hang of things, and you start renting them apartments. And when I realized that I wanted to make sort of the transition from the rental side of the business and start building a career, I transitioned over to Corcoran. And I remember sitting at my desk at Corcoran, literally feeling like I was going to drown. And that was because of lack of opportunity. And so I went and spoke with my manager and I said, what do I need to do in order to get started? And he said, well, you could call FSBOs, you could call expireds, you could work open houses. And so I started to work open houses for agents, and people would literally come in, they'd sign in, and I would stand next to them and make sure that they provided their phone number for the open house registration sheet so that I could call them to follow up the next day. And oftentimes people wouldn't call me back. So I would figure out, all right, they didn't call me back, so let me call them at a different time of day. Let me call them on a different day of the week. And one thing led to another, and I started to build a little business. I was doing 10, 20 deals a year just from open houses because I would call people repeatedly. And, one open house in particular, I met 3 different people from that. I did 3 separate transactions, and one of them actually had a listing for me to call. And a lot of it is just about your mindset and how you approach things. But it's like anything, right? The harder you work and the more you do it, the better you get. And so with you were in the business for 7 years. You built this, this social media following. By the way, how many followers do you have today? I didn't.
On Instagram for the broke agents, like 418,000. And then of course there's Broke Agent Media channel, which is 23,000. Bad Real Estate Picks is almost 100,000. We have the Overask podcast, which is 13,000. And then all the creators under us, and then a massive Facebook audience, YouTube audience, and Twitter audience as well. So, over 1 million across all platforms.
That's fantastic. And are you finding that there's a lot of overlap in, sort of similar users or listeners, viewers from one channel to another?
Yeah, I'm sure there's overlap, but it's a different audience on Facebook. It's an aged up audience, and a lot of agents kind of forget about Facebook, even though like organic reach is coming back with a vengeance on Facebook. I'm seeing so much more shares, comments, everything on my Facebook page because now it's a new recommended algorithm. They're doing vertical video as well, like Reels and YouTube and TikTok. But that audience, the average age of realtor is what, 55 plus, right? Or 55. So yeah, that's a huge audience right there on Facebook. And one of the smartest things we did growing the Broke Agent brand was try to build all of these to the level that they're at right now. It wasn't just like, okay, let's focus on Instagram. Let's build Facebook too. Let's build on Facebook groups. Let's build our Twitter audience. Let's build our YouTube audience. Let's build our Snapchat at the time, because you never know where the puck is going to go on social media. Like TikTok came out of nowhere in 2019, 2020. That was non-existent. It was Musical.ly back then. Instagram was king, and now it's kind of transitioned to TikTok, and now maybe it's coming back to Instagram a little bit because of all the privacy and ridiculous stuff happening with TikTok. So building on all these platforms, building your email list, this is stuff that's so important for brand building, because then you're everywhere, and then you're not vulnerable to the fact of one of these platforms going down, your account getting removed, because who knows what could happen.
Have you ever faced challenges like that, Eric?
Getting an account removed? No. Matt Leonetti, my partner in the Overask podcast, he got his account hacked, basically. How there's all these copycat accounts, especially with realtors. They're very easy to copycat because all their information's public. They have all their pictures up. Like, it's just, agents are really easy targets for this because they operate a lot of their business on social media too. So if you blackmail them for their account, they're probably going to pay something. And a lot of them are older and don't really understand, not older, but a lot of them like aren't used to these sort of like Instagram scams. So his account got taken down for a couple of weeks, and sucked for him because that's a lot of his business is coming from Instagram. Luckily he's built his brand so big where it didn't like initially harm him. But, if his Instagram was completely removed, then he's got to build on YouTube. He's got to build everywhere else. And, it didn't affect our podcast at all because it was only 2 weeks, and it actually gave us something, interesting to talk about.
Right.
But being
unlike the Rubin special.
Unlike the Rubin, no, exactly. And look, we're talking about it again right now. The Rubin special is great. I love the name too. But he got his account back, and like I said, he built his brand so big at the time where it didn't affect him. But that could really hurt agents if you lose your main lead generator on social media. Sure. And that could happen easily.
Now, Matt's up in
Canada.
Yeah, he's up in Canada.
Yeah.
and what part of Canada is he in? Toronto?
He's Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I remembered. And so Matt, of course, is your partner in the Over Ask podcast, and you guys connected a couple years ago, I guess.
Yeah, we connected during end of 2019. I did something called the Agent Spotlight. So I would post videos or Instagram stories of agents that were doing something really funny or entertaining on Instagram. And this was again back in 2019 when not every single agent was doing it like every single agent is doing it now. And he really stood out. He's very talented. He was doing, funny music videos and skits and everything like that. So we connected through that. And then I was doing something called the Broke News Network, which is kind of like an SNL style, 8 minutes. Here's real estate news. Here's some Instagram marketing tactics. And he would be brought on as a guest, or he would do something funny. And then I was like, we should just do something more regular because he was so good at it. And the podcast is way easier than going to a studio and filming something. So we just basically turned it into the Over Ask podcast.
Wow. So Eric, I know that you're like a big sports fanatic.
Yeah. Correct.
What got you into that? I mean, was it just something that you kind of evolved, or, I mean, I was impressed. The first time you and I hung out, your knowledge of sports is, frankly, I don't know anyone with your mental capacity of sports stats.
Jim Larratt's, right? Real estate agent now. I think you mentioned that at 11.
Jimmy Larratt's. Yeah, I mean,
Jimmy Larratt's. Exactly. Yeah. I think, I don't know if I was born with it, but like it was just, I played sports growing up. I was always obsessed with it. My dad's from New York, so I grew up a Yankees fan and saw immediate success in sports. I think that had a lot to do with why I became so obsessed with it. They won in 96, 98, 99, 2000. I got to go to the World Series in 2001.
Good years to be a Yankee fan.
Great years to be a Yankee fan. And then I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, so the Arizona Wildcats, college basketball, huge. And then, it was just, and then I played sports. I was a golfer, played tennis and golf in high school. And sports are, the second biggest thing in my life besides my fiance and the broke agent.
Right.
She's in the other room, so I had to say that.
There you go. So you never got into like darts?
No, it's a foolish sport. No, I don't do any of these gimmicky sports. I play real sports.
There you go.
I mean, ping pong, I'm unbeatable at, but other than that, I don't.
Oh, that's probably. I mean, you have such an incredible wingspan.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I'm 6'3". I could hit every ball.
I mean, 6'3". It's like I'm 5'9", so I'll be like your caddy or something.
Right, exactly. You can hand me the.
Here's another paddle, sir.
Exactly.
And so you went to USC. Were you going to USC for English or what?
What, to learn English?
Yeah, because you grew up in Tucson, so I know that's kind of like
exactly. Yeah, I was speaking Hebrew my entire life. No, I went to USC to get away from Tucson. There wasn't anything specific that I was planning on learning, to be honest. I went there, and I mean, it was a great educational experience, but it was more of the social experience. My friends, great network there. I also went there for the football team because I just grew up a U of A basketball fan, but our U of A football team was terrible. And to be in Los Angeles and to hopefully have a career in Los Angeles. But I studied entrepreneurship and communications is basically studying nothing. So I studied nothing the entire time.
For some reason, I could see you being some sort of writer, like comedic writer, going to, LA, working for some studio and some development role or something. But, you zigged and they zagged, and so here you are with.
Well, I found real estate. That was an easy niche to infiltrate because no one was really attacking it from that angle. So I found a good thing there.
And so, if you had to sort of plot your course from here, where do you see Broke Agent Media taking you?
I mean, I see it becoming the biggest media company in real estate. Hopefully, that is the goal. I see this as my full-time job for 10, 20 years in the near future. I want to build this thing to be the biggest, the biggest events, the biggest blog, the biggest website, the biggest YouTube channel, the biggest education platform, the biggest humor platform, the biggest entertainment platform, having the best podcast, the best creators. And I think we're making the right steps to do that. We've been live since April and already have more engagement and larger following than a lot of these media companies that have been around for a while. So, partnering with Byron was one of the best moves we've made, and a great evolution just of the brand, because I can't keep going on as just making the same, 60, 70 real estate jokes on that page. Like, that's not going to pay the bills. That's not fulfilling. And I have so much more to give as a podcaster, a creator, a writer, and the marketing chops that I could provide to agents, plus Byron's expertise, plus the news, everything like that. I think it's such a new media for real estate agents, and I think people are enjoying it so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the evolution that you've had in your career, and now partnering up with Byron Lazine, who of course we had on the show last week with One and Company, and you and he started Broke Agent Media, which I'm sure is going to be pretty incredible force for years to come. And so, Eric, with that, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to join us. I've been a fan for a long, long time, and I was pretty impressed when I met you. I was just like, wow, that's the Broke Agent. Pretty cool,
You were only impressed when I started naming World Series winners. That's the only time I saw the light flicker in your head. You're like, okay, actually, I could get along with this guy.
Yeah, well,
there was like an hour before where I was trying to, I'm like, all right, this is Josh Rubin. I've seen him at all the Tom Ferry conferences. Everyone's always talking about this guy. I need to meet him, need to befriend him. And then finally, it clicked. So there we go.
So I'm curious though, on that note, one last question. Obviously the news broke this morning with Aaron Judge's huge contract. He got $360 million from the Yankees. Do you think that Aaron Judge would have gotten that contract if not for breaking Roger Maris's record?
No. I mean, I think they offered him 212 for 6. Mm-hmm. Before this year, he bet on himself, broke the record, almost won the Triple Crown, got us to the ALCS again. So he bet on himself and he won. And he is a Yankee for life now. I'm very happy about it. These contracts are so ridiculous, though. I mean, he's going to be in his 40s because, he was a late rookie. I think he was 26, 27 when he was a rookie. So, his production will probably drop off exponentially in the next 4 years. But it's a guy like this that you have to have in your clubhouse. It's a guy like this you have to build around. And I did not want to send him over to San Francisco. It would just be a horrible look. We'd basically have to rebuild our entire team. So very happy the Yankees did it, but all they did was re-sign a guy they already had. They needed to make some real moves and get some actual pitchers and, solve the fact that we struck out 15 to 17 times a game in the playoffs. It was disgusting. So we got to get some contact hitters, get some people on base.
In the meantime, we have the Mets making big moves, signing Verlander, which I was impressed by.
Yeah, I mean, they got rid of DeGrom, right? So they had to replace him with his equal or someone who's at least a little bit more consistent health-wise. Verlander finally got his first World Series win under the belt. So big move by the Mets. I would love to see a Subway Series next year.
That would be killer. So I welcome you to come to the city and we can check out a game or two.
Love to.
And get us some great seats. So
definitely.
Eric and the Broke Agent, thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you real soon in person. Happy holidays. Happy holidays. Thanks, Josh.
Hi, it's Josh Rubin with the Rubin team. Let's take a look.